Hey everybody, I'm Jennifer from Gen W Arts and welcome to today's video. Today I'm going to paint something with gouache. That's a medium that's very new to me, so it's exciting. And at the end of this video I will announce the winner of the marker giveaway. So stay tuned till the end if you want to know who the winners are of the giveaway. I hope you enjoy. Sorry for the abrupt beginning of the video with already a part colored in, but that's because when I started this piece I wasn't planning on recording it because I intended this one to be a practice painting to familiarize myself some more with the gouache medium. Prior to this painting I've only used it to touch up some highlights in watercolor paintings and done two very quick landscape studies with gouache. So I did not intend to record this because I am not super comfortable and acknowledged with this medium yet. But as I started on this background, I changed my mind and recorded it anyway, as it might be interesting for you all to see me dabble with something new, and it might encourage or inspires you to get out of your comfort zone to try something new, whether that is a new art medium or a subject or style you haven't drawn before. So for this piece I wanted to try and paint it a bit more loose and restrain myself to go too detailed. And believe me, that's going to be hard because I lose myself very easily in going too detailed with a piece, so I could easily overwork this. But we will see if I can succeed this challenge. As I had no real idea how to go about using this medium, I decided to lay down the first layer of the background very light by diluting it with water so it becomes more transparent like watercolors, and from there go bolder and darker with my layers, using a Prussian blue and a violet for colors. When you do not dilute the gouache, it's super opaque and dries in a matte finish, although I found that the Schmincke titanium white dries quite shiny for some reason. It's the only color that doesn't dry up matte, which I found a bit weird, to be honest. Also, I found that it is super easy to go with a light color over a dark one when the underlying layers are dry. This I found when I decided to lighten up the colors around the cat. Gouache can also be reactivated with water every single time, as it is a non-permanent material. This can be a great advantage as it makes blending and softening up edges much easier and gives you a much broader working time to rework an area as much as you want to, as you don't have to worry about drying time. But it can also be a disadvantage as it is hard to glaze. An underlying color might reactivate and mix with the new layer of color you lay down. This is especially true when you're used to work with acrylics or colored pencils like I am, which are all media that requires you to glaze to build your color values. So I really had to flip the switch while working with gouache, as it works so differently from any of the other art materials I usually use. I blocked in the cat with a mid-tone gray, blocking in all the shadows and darker values first, hoping that when I would go over it with a diluted flesh color, I would still be able to see the gray first layer underneath. Some colors are more opaque than the others, especially the pastel colors seem to be the most opaque, probably due to the fact that they are mixed with the titanium white pigment. Also, I found that mixing colors with gouache can be tricky, as dark colors tend to dry up lighter and light colors tend to dry up darker. So you have to keep this in mind when you select and mix your colors. But even though the diluted flesh color was still quite opaque, I could still see my gray layers underneath, and luckily they did not mix and blend with each other too much. I suppose the less water you use over a dry layer, the lower the chances are the old layer reactivates. Knowing this, I started to build my layers on the cat with colors I used in the background. The Prussian blue, primary blue and the violet with hardly any water. But this meant that the new layers were much harsher in color and had sharper edges. But then you can always blend those out a bit with water and mix it gently with the underlaying layers to get a softer edge or a gradient. And if by accident you go to dark, you can always go back in with a lighter color to get your lighter values back. So while I found gouache a difficult medium, it is quite forgiving at the same time. At this point I started to realize how similar the Neocolor 2 crayons from Caran'dache work to gouache, which I have used before in an older video on my channel. I will link the video to this video's description. And I remembered what a blast I had using those crayons at the time. Though the advantage with the crayons over the gouache paint for me was that I could approach it in a colored pencil way, by first applying a dry layer with the crayon and then water it down with a wet brush. And once the layer was dry again, apply a new dry layer with the crayon and again water it down, which was a lot more easier for me as it was a more familiar working approach and new added layers did not mix until you started working them more heavily. So if you're used to colored pencils and want to get an idea on how gouache works, those crayons might be a great product to start the transition to gouache. At least it worked for me as soon as I remembered how similar the Neocolor 2 crayons were to gouache. I could transfer some of that knowledge and experience over to this piece with this paint. Now that I think of it, it might be interesting to use the crayons together with the paint sometime in the future. While working on this painting, I used paint both fresh from the tube and some that had been sitting on my palette dry for some time. In both cases I had no problem with the paints, as the dried up paint reactivated quite easily with just a bit of water. Though the dried up paint does crack on the palette, but that's because of the fillers I heard. I also heard you can fix that by mixing a bit of honey through the paint. But I don't think I will go travel with my gouache paints as I prefer watercolors for plein air or on my travels. So to me the cracking and crumbling isn't much of a problem. Though I did get a small set of the Holbein gouache recently and their cracking is really minimal, so that makes them the better paint to travel with. The Winsor&Newton paints crack the most, while the Schmincke are a bit in between the Holbein and the Winsor&Newton regarding to the cracking. But painting wise, both the Schmincke and Winsor&Newton paints work just as great. Both have great vibrant colors and glide across the paper with ease. Just when you squeeze them out of the tubes onto the palette, the Schmincke paints all have a good firm consistency, while the Winsor&Newton paints aren't very consistent. Some of the Winsor&Newton colors come out nice and thick, but some come out very thin and watery. While I had one tube of the Winsor&Newton, the primary red color, that hardly came out at all and was very dry and chunky. Once dried, it was very hard to reactivate it, so I'm not sure if the tube was old or maybe something was up with the fillers on that one, but it wasn't right. Also, the Schmincke colors are more light fast in most cases than the other brands, though this might not be super important as gouache is mainly used for illustration and designing purposes than it is for actual gallery display works. Also, in price range, the Winsor&Newton paints are the most affordable, as the price range for a tube is between €3.79 and the €10, while the Schmincke Horadam ranges between the €6.24 and the €13 a tube. Schmincke does have some cheaper alternatives, which are the Academy gouache, which starts at €4 per tube, and the HKS Designers gouache, which starts at €5.44 per tube. There are even cheaper brands like the Lucas Studio gouache that is about €1.80 per tube. but I'm not sure about the quality of that paint, so I think for a small €4 tube, the Winsor&Newton Gouache are excellent paints for a small price to start with. While working on the painting, I wanted to add an additional color to add some more interest amidst all the blue and purple. So I mixed a magenta with a bit of white and added some pink strokes in the background and at the side of the cat to serve as some kind of highlight. This allows the cat to come loose of the background a bit more. Then I decided to go bold with the eyes and cross and make those a yellow gold, so those would really pop off the paper and would become the focal point of the painting. Lastly, it wouldn't be me if I did not add some kind of sparkle into my picture, so I used a rose Finetec paint and a champagne colored gold paint from Gansai tambi to add some shimmer to the cat's eyes, earrings and the purples in the background. Lastly, I added some white highlights in the eyes and painted in the whiskers and the white details of the earring. So that was it for the painting. Now on to the part you've all been waiting for, the announcement of the winners.